Hi, everyone. Welcome to All's Authors and Aging and Amazing's Books and Chit Chat. Tonight we have the lovely Dorothy Horn here to share with us her caregiving story with her husband Byron and how their faith helped them along the way. Before we start, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Christy Byrne Yates.
Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be here, and this will be very interesting. So many great things to talk about tonight.
Yes, for sure. And Malika Moore, who is the founder and operator of Aging and Amazing, a very valuable resource and community for those of us who are aging or perhaps in caregiving stage of our life. So welcome, Malika.
Thank you.
And Al's Authors is the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience to light the way for others. We're so glad you are here, and thank you for sharing your precious time with us. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce Dorothy. Hello, Dorothy.
Hey, everybody. So glad to be part of this tonight.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. And where are you Zooming in from?
Longview, Texas.
Okay, Texas. We have a few authors from Texas, so really interested in hearing your story. And Dorothy is a first grade teacher. And used to be retired, right? A retired first grade teacher and also a columnist for a local newspaper for many years, right? Which is the basis of your book.
Well, it just was kind of happenstance. Now, I will confess that since the pandemic or the mid-pandemic, I haven't written any, but they've told me I still have the green light for when I start writing them in again. Yeah, the books are pretty much everything in there was originally a column in the newspaper first.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, can you share with us a little bit about your dementia journey and maybe tell us a little bit about Byron?
Well, yes, I'd be glad to. Would this be a good time to read my preface? Kind of puts it in a nutshell.
That's fine.
Okay. In the first book, the preface, I titled it The Accidental Columnist, which would be me. Our first column by accident when the Longview News Journal's managing editor asked me if he could run my letter to the editor about mental illness on the Saturday forum page instead. It was the summer of 2009. Our daughter had been diagnosed 2 years prior with severe postpartum depression and obsessive compulsive disorder after the birth of her first son. We had been trying to navigate the maze of the mental health system since the onset of her illness and continually came across ignorance and stigma surrounding the mental illness. I felt a need to give voice about all we had been witnessing. So our daughter courageously gave us permission to share our family's experience because, she said, if it helps someone else not to feel alone, then it'll be worth it. After that column, I continued submitting to the forum page on a regular basis because it was such a wonderful way to help educate and raise awareness about mental illness. There was also another reason. I wanted to share the serendipitous glimpses of grace and God's provisions that we had been blessed with along the way. I never would have guessed the heartbreak of mental illness could also include so many blessings, but that is God's way. Thanks be to Him, our daughter got better. Then, shortly thereafter, in November of 2011, my husband was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. At least, we said to ourselves, we already know God will provide and that there will be blessings in this journey too. So I continued to write and prayed that I would remain open to sensing His presence and seeing through eyes of faith. Many of the essays in this book chronicle how living with Alzheimer's has affected our lives, our family, and our faith as we continue to walk this road. Of course, this was book one, published back in 2015. There are a variety of other stories, reflections, and humorous observations also. Our roads weave through light and laughter and alongside the quiet grace of ordinary days. In these writings, I choose to acknowledge but not focus on the negative aspects of living with the disease, but rather on how God is working through it as our family seeks to walk with His provision and strength. His grace is the golden thread that binds us together. Glimpses of this grace, like shooting stars, have consistently penetrated our darkness and illuminated a basic truth. All is grace. Therefore, the overlying theme of the book is not about a disease, but rather about God's grace, hope, and provision in all circumstances. The purpose of the book is to point towards God as the source of strength and light. I pray it will serve as a vehicle for giving Him the glory. And then over here on becoming light bearers was another very important moment in our journey. There are now more than 5 million people in the U.S. diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. On November 9th, 2011, my husband became one of them. And I talk about how at least we told ourselves after the diagnosis, we already knew the drill for catastrophic illnesses since our daughter had suffered from the mental illness previous years. Although it was extremely scary and traumatic time, we were blessed with God's grace and love along the way. Now, 4 months later, the Alzheimer's diagnosis is still unbelievable at times. We cycle back and forth through the stages of grief that are numbness and denial, anger and resentment, guilt and regret, depression and despair, and at times, some degree of acceptance. I guess that will go on a while. I've been surprised at what some people have chosen to share, although I'm sure they meant well. A few have expressed to me that Alzheimer's is a living hell and warned us that we are entering a nightmare. I have no doubt that the pain and suffering are tremendous, and I have much sympathy for those who have experienced or are currently experiencing that depth of pain. But right now, we need to hear about grace and hope, any kind. I reminded myself that surely God could be found in the midst of pain, somewhere, somehow. After all, He promised. Please, God, I pray, let me see You. I will try to remember to keep my eyes and heart open, especially as the darkness deepens. Then, through the newly formed Alzheimer's Trailblazers Support Education Group, His reassurance came. At the first meeting, we met an eloquent couple who were to become our role models for how to live with Alzheimer's. Bob, not his real name, is a distinguished and eloquent man who was diagnosed about 7 years ago. He and his wife radiate love for each other, and God's hand in their journey became immediately apparent as they shared it with us. They said it better, but it went something like this. We are viewing this disease as a curve in the road, not the end of the road. We view it as an inconvenience. It is part of our lives, but not the center of our lives. We seize every moment. We laugh, have fun, and enjoy each other to the fullest. God is good. Wow. It makes all the difference in the world when you find light bearers, those people who are walking or who have walked the broken road, and will remind you, it will be okay. God's joy will be with you, and He will carry you through the pain. To Him, you can persevere. We are coming to realize that although this is our story, the disease should not be the main idea, and neither should we. The main idea is not what happens to us, but what happens through us. Will we live in such a manner that God can use us to become vessels of His love and light? Will we allow our life circumstances, both the blessings and the trials, to draw us closer to God or push us further away? Will we live well the story we have been given? Everything else seems beside the point. That was in 2012. Yeah, those are two I for sure wanted to share with y'all.
Oh, yeah. They're beautiful. I love that one about the light bearers. When I read that, I said that's just a message that a lot of caregivers have to hear. And I'll tell you, I'm currently putting together another podcast episode with another woman who cared for her husband. And she thought that their caregiving journey was the most special time of their lives. She said they felt in the early years that they were like dating, and she had you know who I'm talking about, Christy.
Yeah.
Eileen Simon. So she also put a very positive spin on the whole thing. So because people are negative and people will tell you horrible stories. And a lot of the language that surrounds Alzheimer's and dementia is bleak and hopeless. You know, people are stricken, they're suffering, and they have all these words. So it's good to get away from that. So thank you, Dorothy, for that reminder.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like that's a really important thing to bring up, and also for our listeners, and you know, to be mindful of how you're might be addressing somebody who's has a recent diagnosis, and you want to tell them your story. And if your experience is all negative, then that's what you're going to share. That might not be where that person is. It is important to also for anyone to stop and listen. Where are these people? What's going on for them right now? Because, you know, I think about how it sounded like, how it was for you and your husband to hear this negativity was so hard. And then when you heard this opening, like you said, a light bearer, and that's beautiful. And it's not to say one experience is right and one experience is wrong. It's that we have all kinds of experiences. So to leave room for that.
Right. Exactly. And it
Yeah.
just put us on a different path. And actually, I'll have to backtrack a little. A few days after Byron got diagnosed, his first reaction was, I don't want to tell anybody. I don't want people to know about this. But again, I shared with him our daughter and said, remember how she was able to go public and actually had a paper write about it, to help other people. Now, you know, we can do that too. And so sure enough, he talked to a few other people, and then he's like, a few days later, he's like, okay, I'm okay. And he was a musician, a very talented man. So he wrote, this is he did this kind of thing all the time. He wrote a funny song to announce his diagnosis. And I don't know if y'all had met it or had read it in there, but it was called I'll Never Forget Alzheimer. And it was a bar song, he called it. And it's got like seven chapters or seven stanzas in here. I didn't mark it, but I can go back and find it if y'all want me to read that. But that's how he started out. And people it was at a group that we were a part of, that everybody in there was interested in writing in some way, and we'd meet monthly, I think. So Byron got up there with his guitar and played all that. And he even had the paper came out and filmed him.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah, people were laughing. I mean, nobody, but we hadn't told him yet that he was going to announce it to the song. So they were laughing and crying, and this is where we started hearing all that. People would come up and go, oh, I mean, some of them were like, they were okay, but, oh, this is so terrible. It's like the worst thing in the world. You know, all that. It's like, seriously, people. Anyway.
Have you had anyone else in your family that had Alzheimer's or dementia?
Not on my side of the family, but Byron's side. He had several aunts and uncles.
Okay.
And his mother was a very light case of it. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask, what were some of because he was diagnosed at such an early age, what were some of the signs that you were aware of, or that he became aware of, that led you to investigate and eventually get a diagnosis?
Yes, that's a good question. He was a very smart man, funny, talented, best memory I had ever come across. He made mine look just pitiful by comparison. And so over a period of 2 to 3 years, I started noticing that things were changing. And at least for 2 of those years, when it's time to go get the yearly checkup, I said, would you ask your doctor to check your memory? And he would come back. He came back the first time and said, I can't remember if he said he didn't think it needed checked or if he didn't, that Byron didn't tell him. So the next year I reminded him again, came home, didn't do it. The third year I went with him. I said, "This constellation." It's like, "You don't need to go with me." It's like, "Yes, I do. 'Cause this is important." And so I went in, I went in the waiting or into the doctor's office with him and told the doctor that, I really would like for you to test Byron. I'm here because he doesn't think he needs testing, but I really think he does. Would you please test? And the doctor says, "Okay, Byron, your wife wants you tested." And it was okay, but I didn't give up. They didn't catch it there. But I then found somebody, let's see, they call it,
Neuropsychiatrist?
thank you, yes, neuropsychologist. Oh, it's a neuropsychologist, though. I said psychiatrist, neuropsychologist.
Yeah.
So he did a battery, and I went with Byron. Byron, of course, didn't want to go. Did a battery of pretty much all testing all day a few months later because it took a while to get in. And he did excellent in everything except for in short-term memory. It was a severe deficit. That's went up. And the doctor said, "Well, it could get better. It could stay the same, or it could develop into Alzheimer's at some point." And so he started taking 2 Alzheimer's medications and we just continued living our lives. And really, there was nobody could have ever told at that point. And then it was either that first year, or it may have been, I think it was just the end of that first year that he was taking the Alzheimer's medication, that all of a sudden he did have kind of a dip. There was something really kind of big it was new that he couldn't remember. And so I called one of our other doctors and said, "Okay, this is what happened. Do we need to act on this?" And he said, "Yeah, I can do a spinal tap. There's let's see, the spinal tap, there's something in there." They found the Alzheimer's,
The gene, the APOE gene or something like that. Yeah. Wow.
you can look it up, but yeah, they found that it have Alzheimer's because it was found in the spinal fluid.
So there were little signs that you found as his partner, as his wife. You were seeing little things, and then it sounds like it was a journey. Like it took a couple years, 3 years or so, just to even get it on the horizon. Looking at that, and I think that's that's consistent with what we hear from a lot of people is, and even we have some neurologists who are part of Al's authors, and that, a lot of times people may be living with this for a long time before it starts to be really incapacitating. But do you feel like because you had gone through, some challenges with your daughter and her dealing with her postpartum depression, that you maybe were sensitive to changes and looking at things and made you just, I don't know, push a little harder to find out? Do you think that had any impact on you?
It may have. I've never considered that exactly. I just knew that Byron was really the smartest person I'd ever met and started having problems with things.
Sure.
And so, yes, and then turned out it was early onset.
Mm.
So he lived 7 more years. However, those first 3 years, like I said, he was in 2 drug trials. Both of them ended early, but one of them seemed to kind of help him. But then they I guess they both ended early or something. Kind of shady on that. But still, those first 3 years, 4 years after he was diagnosed, nobody could really, I could tell. But
Sure.
He was an actor, and he played his guitar in the praise band and just did all sorts of things. He continued doing those. Now, I guess when it was getting near the 3rd year, maybe even the 2nd year, Whereas before, he was Santa Claus every Sunday or every year, every Christmas, like for the museum. He never had a Mrs. Claus. I became his Mrs. Claus because he kind of needed he needed another person there. And so that's how we kind of picked up the slack. I would just be this helpmate. And really, unless we told people, they couldn't pick up on it. But that continued for a number of years. And then about the fourth year, all of a sudden there was a bigger drop.
Sure. So you mentioned being that Byron was in some clinical trials. Can you talk a little bit about how that was for you as a partner looking on, or what your recollection is about his attitude towards that? Because I think that's something people like to hear about.
Yeah. In fact, I have I have a essay or two about him in this first book here. But we were both thrilled because it was something that we knew it wasn't a sure thing, but it was just like, we were doing something. And so, and we had to drive to Dallas for the first clinical trial. The second one, they actually came to us. But yeah, he would go, it made him feel upbeat, and he realized, and I've quoted, there's a number of times I quote him in here, and sometimes a whole page or two were just his thoughts about what he thought. And he was just like, he said something like, I know that it may not work, but it makes me feel good that I'm doing something that may help other people too. Just discovering something that may help. So he said, even if it doesn't work for me, it makes me feel good to be doing this.
Wow.
But they would have the big chair, and he would have to sit there for a few hours, but he just, it was nice because we were doing something.
Yeah.
And then he did that a second time too. And then they stopped that trial early because I guess it wasn't showing signs. And after that, it was like, by that point, you can only do trials, or at least back then you could, up to a certain point. And after that, they knew it wasn't going to work if you were kind of far along.
Sure.
So yeah, his tipping point was like about 4 years, and then things stopped. However, he had something else that happened shortly after he'd gotten where he couldn't do very much at all. It's like all of a sudden we went out in the backyard, and I was throwing the ball with him, and he was starting to catch it really well. And I said, oh my goodness. So we went to Walmart, and I bought a basketball and another baseball and a glove, and there were hula hoops hanging. We were in the hula hoops section too. I took one out, and I said, here, see if you can hula hoop. And he started jumping it. Walmart, this was another really positive side of Byron's Alzheimer's journey, is we just we didn't care anymore what people thought of us. We just had fun. We just did stuff like that. I never would have, especially me. Byron would kind of done anything, but not William. Anyway, so we went home, and we did all that. And I took him to the gym, basketball goals, and he was getting basket after basket after basket. And again, this was after he had gone down. It was year 4. And I called the neurologist. It was happened to Byron recently. Does this sound like a miracle to you? And I don't know if he was just humoring me or not, but he says, it does sound like a miracle to me. And it lasted for a few weeks, maybe. I don't think it lasted for a few months. And then he went back to how he'd been. But that was just some kinds of things. But
it's fascinating. Yeah.
Mm. But if you hadn't tried, just to pick up the ball and start throwing it, then you wouldn't have known.
Oh.
You would have been, if you were just sitting around not doing anything, and wouldn't have discovered that he could do that.
Right.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like that. I want to get back to your faith. Have you always had such a strong faith your whole life as a child, or when did that start for you?
I would say pretty much I have.
Mm-hmm.
Although my parents weren't particularly churchgoers, but I felt close to God early on. I don't know why, but I did. And I also journaled starting probably around first grade, just because, and I journaled for years and years and now write, but so maybe journaling helped me feel closer to God, my faith grew and grew and grew. And of course, as there were several instances, several periods of time in my life when I did not, I did not act in the faith. I and I had to, I had to apologize. I had to ask forgiveness for God. So it's not like I've been this really good person all my life, and I've certainly had my setbacks, but I have felt really close to God, and after um, I I really asked for forgiveness for those times that I wasn't acting like I should, and just things, and he always, I mean, and Byron had a very strong faith too, and he took care of us. Now, it didn't mean everything was hunky dory, but it just means we felt it and we knew he was there for us.
Sure. Yeah.
So, another question I had, reading the beginning of your book, and you talk about your experience with your daughter's postpartum depression, which is a serious issue here in the United States. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but here it's something that is often overlooked and untreated, and a lot of women suffer, and there are occasions when it leads to a tragedy. If we see that in the news, it's, considered a mental illness. And Alzheimer's disease, in many ways, is considered a mental illness as well, as is dementia. So there are a lot of parallels between the two. There's a lot of stigma. People are afraid to talk about it. People are afraid to deal with anybody who has it. Even family members might disappear in the face of a dementia diagnosis. Could you maybe talk a little bit about that? What did you find in your experience that were parallels?
Well, I haven't thought about it like that before. My daughter, I hesitate to talk too much about her since I don't have, since I haven't asked for permission as an adult. But she continued to struggle in different ways. I don't guess I saw too much of a correlation between Alzheimer's and mental illness
So what was it like for her getting a diagnosis?
for my daughter.
Yeah, like when she started showing, like your husband did, showing signs that something's not right, and you were pursuing, trying to bring that to the attention of the medical people, and
Yeah.
then it happens a lot for women in that condition.
Yes. Then this kind of, it was her first child, and so the birth of the first child brought it on,
Mm-hmm.
and she got better for a while, but it turned out she had some things. I guess it kind of brought out some things, and so she has struggled with various things off and on all her life. Um, yeah, I don't, yeah.
We can move away from that. So, what would you say if you met somebody today and they said, my husband or my wife or my mom has Alzheimer's? What would you say to them?
Well, I would first ask them if there was anything I could do, and I would assure them that God's grace would be with them, and that it doesn't have to be an awful thing. Now, granted, some people do have just the way the disease attacks people different ways, and some of them do have a bad time, and just a lot of, Alzheimer's can come out in a lot of ways, a lot of different ways. Byron was fortunate that his wasn't really like that. Now, granted, it did get worse, but he never had some of the, and of course, let me back up a little. So, of course, dementia, calling it dementia, that's the umbrella, and Alzheimer's is one of the things under that umbrella. And there's a whole bunch, which I know y'all know about, of other dementias that affect the body and the person in different ways. And some are much, much worse than others. Byron was fortunate that he didn't. I mean, his got worse, but it never did the weird things that some of the dementia diseases do to people.
Yeah. And was he home with you throughout this journey, or?
Yes, he was. We were both retired. Up through about the 4th year, it was really pretty easy because our thing was, of course, after about a year, he couldn't drive, but we went everywhere together. He kept doing his things, we just modified and adjusted. Everything, modify and adjust as he got worse. But as far as it's starting to get really hard, affecting me and him both, was about the 4th, 5th year. And where typically maybe some of the patients, I say patients, meaning the person with Alzheimer's, they find it harder to sleep. They'll maybe get up and walk around and sleepwalk. They could be starting to see things on the roof. They just starting and just really they're just losing more of themselves. And so it's kind of more upsetting. So things get more difficult as time goes on. And for us, it started like 4th, 5th year. And so during those times, I knew, and I'm backing up, I didn't even mention this. He also went to this wonderful place, a church that opened up opened themselves up once a week for all the people who signed up and had Alzheimer's up to a certain point. They couldn't come in if they were really far advanced. But he did that for a long time, and that was great. Just having that outlet, so that the spouses, etc., could go and get some time away and do some things that they might want to do that they wouldn't be able to do if they're caring for their spouse. So he did that. After a certain, so like I said, I think it was the late 4th, 5th year, he started getting like nervous, kind of scared and more clingy. He got like maybe the 6th year and the 7th year, he didn't really like to get in the car. So things got harder. I hired several different people over the course of those few years to come in twice a week and or half a day and stay with him. So while I could go run errands or go do something, just kind of to keep, just so I could continue being a good caregiver.
Well, then you need that time. I do want to I know Malika has a question. But what I'm hearing you talk about is that need for you as a caregiver for some respite. And so this church opened up and he could have some time during the day to go and be occupied in a way that was meaningful. But then you got a breath to go out and do the things you needed to do. So you could show up with him, without things on your mind. Like, I have to get this done. I have to get this. That's absolutely incredibly necessary. So I certainly appreciate that. I want to invite Malika to ask her question.
Okay, so I was just kind of listening to you, and it seems like, and you could correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, it seems like your husband's diagnosis and even your daughter's kind of help you release or this idea of perfection, or like I heard you say that with the hula hoop, I thought that was a really good example of how not caring what people think anymore. And also, I heard you talk about your faith and how you haven't been perfect, which I don't think any of us can say on this call, and how you had to. So I put like three things together. I hear you talking about faith, forgiveness, and freedom. And so I had those three F's, and then I wanted to know, a lot of times I'll see where people have been caregiving, and like you mentioned, it could be the experience can vary. It could vary in one day, or just as a whole, people can have a different outlook on it. And after the person passes away, they struggle with, okay, well, who am I now that this has been going on 7 years, 3 years? Because I've gotten so caught up in following up on doctor's appointments and monitoring changes from year to year. So my long drawn out summary and question is, like, who are you now, after the caregiving experience?
A good question. No, it's been 7 years since he died now. Uh, I'm I'm lonely. I'm living in the same house that we lived in and that our children grew up in and all that. It's a little sad. However, I'm also very connected with a bunch of different things. It's not like I don't have anything to do. I don't sit around here and twiddle my thumbs. In fact, you know how we women get. We kind of get too much going on. Um, I know it was really hard for me after he died, just even though he'd been in memory care for a year, by that, 'cause that's how long he was there before he died. And I'd go see him twice at like lunch and stay a little bit. And if I went back, I'd come back at dinner. And so and I'm kind of getting off track here, but I think I need to talk about that first before
I think you're on track.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of him being in the facility, it was terrible. I mean, it was just very hard on me to let go of him because I felt like a bad person, or just actually anticipating letting go of him. When he actually got in the facility, he loved it. He was around all those people. I went to see him twice a day. We danced down the hall. I had my what did I didn't have a what? I guess I had my little thingy. And I'd play music and we'd dance down the halls to it. And just had fun. And he was one of those real personable people. And even though he had his moments where since he was kind of far advanced then, he's he really got along with people and he'd dance with them. And it was fun. It was kind of for a while a good time. But then he stopped. There were times when he wouldn't be able to remember my name, but he would look in my eyes and I could see the love. And there was that glow there. So that kind of helped.
So that was good because we learned about like how your experience was still as a caregiver, putting moving your loved one to a memory care. Now I'm asking you, like, after the caregiving journey was over, so to speak, in some aspect, after your husband passed, who were you? Like, how did you have any transition issues or concerns? I know you mentioned being lonely, but what was that shift like from being on 24/7 to making sure your husband is okay to it just being you?
Yeah. Well, that last year, it won like 24/7 for me since he was in the facility. But it was sad. And I remember it took me a while to stop being, because when he died, for a while, I had just kind of the worst things come to my head at night. I guess it was just getting through the grieving process.
Mhm.
But then after a while, I don't know if it was a year or if it was just a few months, I I think God just healed me from that, and I just started looking back, and kind of the really hard parts that I didn't even like to think about faded, and I could just remember the joy and just how he would look into my eyes even through almost the very last day. And just so all the rest just kind of went away. Now the lonely part was probably because I don't have my kid, neither daughter lived in town. And of course I'm really involved in a bunch of stuff. And I enjoy, I've got friends, I do things. It's just, yeah, being a widow, it's a little hard. Mm. And with an empty house. I think I'd be better off if I weren't in the house that my kids grew up in and that Byron lived in. It's okay.
Oh, we have a question from one of our guests here.
I'm a Dorothy too, but I just go by Dor. Hello, Dorothy. I was thinking about the caregiving journey and wondered, in your recollection, do you have any memories of what was really helpful to you that others did to help you during that time as a caregiver? I have a friend whose mom has Alzheimer's. I took care of my mother-in-law who had Alzheimer's. My sister now has FTD, so I'm a new caregiver for her. But I'm just wondering, like, were there any things that stand out in your mind? Like, wow, that really helped me.
There were a lot of things, and that reminds, if I have some things written down on this, and I would like to go over to that.
Okay.
Okay. Things that they did, and this is even kind of before he went into memory care, but like things that helped both of us together, some and some for him, just him, was our church really started reaching out, and just like our pastor. I guess it was easier for him to, so many people are ashamed of the diagnosis and they don't really want it out there, and nobody will talk about it. But Byron, since he was really open about it, the pastor invited us one Sunday just to fill his pulpit, and just the whole thing was going to be people could ask whatever questions they wanted and we would answer them. And then Byron it made him feel loved. And it was a great thing to have done. Another thing is, there was a man who, I think it's someone in our church, he took it upon himself to take Byron and a few other men out for coffee every week. So that was a way some people stepped in. What else did they? Oh, this was really neat. So he had been a member of a prayer group and it wasn't our church prayer group. It was there's an organization that's called Cursillo, like Walk to Emmaus. And we had been to a number of Cursillos together. And when you come home from a Cursillo, you put together a prayer group, or it's suggested you put together a prayer group and you meet every week if possible, and just, pray for each other and that kind of thing. Well, his prayer group met for over 10 years. And when he went into the facility, they stopped, they'd always come by the house and pick him up wherever they were going. When he went to the facility, they started meeting at the facility with him until he died.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Wow. That is grace. That's amazing.
So there's a lot of things like that. I was trying to find it on my notes, but I didn't come across it. But there were a number of things like that. And what else? people would just, I had some friends who would say, can I do something with Byron today? Can I, take him out for a walk or do that? And that was always helpful. And, um, yeah, people, I'm very grateful for all the help we got from people. And it was able to be that way since he wasn't shy about sharing his diagnosis. Unfortunately, we ran over the years that we were, and since then, there's a lot of people who just they're ashamed and they don't want people to really know. And
It's true.
yeah, that answer your question?
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. Is there anything else you would like to tell us before we say goodbye?
Well, let me see. There is something else I want to tell you, because it's something I learned after Byron had died. The year after, we had at the time I was on the Alzheimer's Alliance board. It was fairly new. It started the year after he died, 2019. And they occasionally brought people in to speakers to talk to not only us, but the people that we would gather. And there's a man called Michael Verde. I don't know if y'all heard of him when he was here, president and founder of Memory Bridge. And he lives up north somewhere. I forgot the name of his city, his town right now, but he's an internationally known speaker. And he spoke several days to us. And I heard things that I had not really heard before. And it was that this is what he said. He said there is a new paradigm of dementia care that stresses that a person's well-being depends on belonging to a community, not just having biological needs met and being managed. People with dementia still desire to give and receive love. However, and if you think, I know if you think about this, because I think I did it some too, we occasionally inadvertently end up focusing more on a person's biological needs and managing their behavior rather than prioritizing their emotional and social needs. And Verde also said, the main source of suffering in Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia is not primarily because a person's brain cells are dying, but rather because of emotional isolation and feeling disconnected. And that does not have to be part of the diagnosis. With dementia, need to feel like they belong and matter because it's a primary human need. They need to feel valued and connected. Being with is the kind of care they need, not doing for, or not just doing for. Emotional isolation can also occur when friends, acquaintances, church members, and others are uncomfortable about being around people with dementia. It's not because they're uncaring, and I know I've done this before. I knew better, and I think probably most of us have. It's just, you don't really know what to say. It's just easier not to reach out when you're not sure. And Verde refers to this as othering. And, yeah, and I saw that happen to Byron sometimes. But anyway, I wanted to be sure. That just made a real impact on me because I had not heard that before. I heard it a few years ago.
I think social isolation can be very detrimental to anyone with most kinds of disease processes, but certainly people get, like you said, maybe a little, I don't know what to say, so I just avoid it because of my uncomfortability rather than trying to say, gosh, I don't know what to say, so I'll just hang out here with you kind of thing. So it does, as you said, other people, that's a term I've heard, and it's hard, and then you have to balance that with, there is also the aspect of people who have dementia process going on. Their world shrinks because other people might not know how to be around them, but they also might not, it sounds like Byron was game to go out and play and do things. And so up to a point.
And about fourth, fifth year, he was starting.
And then sometimes people get unwilling to move because it's frightening, I would imagine. I don't know because I've not been in that. I couldn't get into my person's head and find out, but that feeling of, no, I don't want to go. And then you as the caregiver are kind of stuck between how, I'm enticing, I'm encouraging, I'm inviting, I might even be bribing them to come out and do something. But how far do you push?
Right.
And so it's tricky, isn't it? So where can we find you? Where can we find your, are you still writing for the paper?
I haven't. Well, I asked them, hey, can I start writing for you again a few weeks ago? And they said, sure. I haven't done it yet. I've got all this going on. My second book came out the beginning of the summer, and luckily, I'm not complaining, but there's been a lot of things that people have asked me to do this and that, come talk to their group and this
Sure.
and that. I hadn't had time to do all that, but
So
yeah.
can we find you online? Do you have a web?
www.dorothyhornauthor.com.
Got it. We'll make sure that this is in the show notes and people can see that. So we've got you at dorothyhornauthor.com. And then I think we probably have all your social handles and we can put those in the show notes.
Yeah.
And then we will have a link to your book too. So that's wonderful. Yeah.
And if you could have a link to my newest book too, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
This is a great spot. Okay.
You'll see it on the blog post.
Okay. Awesome.
When it comes out next month.
And I did love Malika's comment about faith, forgiveness, and what was the faith, forgiveness, and freedom. Wow.
Yeah.
How beautiful. That's wonderful.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dorothy. It's lovely having you.
Thank y'all very much for inviting me. That meant a lot to me, and I appreciate you very much. And just all that y'all do, I appreciate you so very much.
Well, thank you.
So,
All right.
Thank you for sharing.
well, you are so welcome, and thank y'all for having me.
Okay.
Oh.
So
We're all
that's it. We will thank you. Thanks, Malika. Thank you, Dora, for coming.
This was fun, and again, it's a big honor, and that y'all asked me, and I thank you.
You betcha.
thank you.
Well, y'all take care.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Books and Chit Chat with Owls, Authors, and Aging and Amazing. Be sure to visit our blog, podcast, and shop at owlsauthors.com to find more resources for your dementia journey. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, or X, Instagram, and LinkedIn, where we share a wealth of resources for the dementia journey. Remember, you are not alone. Only one can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony. Thank you.
Hi, it's Mary Ann with exciting news. Alls Authors has published a brand new anthology, Poetry for the Dementia Journey, now available in ebook and paperback through Amazon. Within its pages, you'll discover a variety of voices writing about the diversity of dementia care experiences, caring for a mother or father or spouse, witnessing the decline of a sibling, reflections on the time before the diagnosis, the years of care, and the aftermath. Poetry provides us with a meaningful way to explore our experience and emotions regarding dementia and to express ourselves when we encounter the many different joys and dilemmas caregiving can bring. You'll find details on how to order the book in the show notes. Please remember to leave a review on the book sales page once you've read it. Reviews do help boost a book's visibility and helps readers find it. Thank you for your support of our efforts to erase the silence and stigma that often accompany a dementia diagnosis.
Caregiving is a challenge, whether your person has dementia or not. Finding helpful tips and learning new strategies from people in the know is critical. That's why we at Owls Authors love the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast from Elizabeth Miller, who also happens to be an Owls author. Elizabeth speaks from experience and has important and often fun conversations with other caregiving experts and professionals. And we appreciate learning tips on self-care, discovering new resources, and feeling empowered to support ourselves as caregivers. You can find the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast wherever you download your favorite podcasts, or visit the website happyhealthycaregiver.com.